Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. This is the Group of 5 Deep Dive. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by my Action Network co-host, Duck. Listen, last week we took it on the chin. There's no way around it. For those who were blasting us, well, I mean, that's what we sign up for. We had a hot start to the season. We felt that love. We had no feel for the games last week. We got to take that negativity as it comes. Like Aldo Rain said in Inglourious Bastards, I've been chewed out before. It's fine. I can take it. I'll tell you one thing, though. Duck and I were back in the trenches looking for angles this week, looking for any advantage, texting each other back and forth. I got so deep into it. I was looking at a defensive coordinator's high school tape to see how he was matching up against an option offense. So we really took all of that nervous energy, that negativity, and turning it towards productivity this week. So I'm hoping that we're just coming with winners through our best bets, through our 2-minute drill, even the 4-minute offense that Duck does every week. Hopefully we can give out a lot of lucrative and profitable angles for this week. All right, Duck. With that, enough of the recount from last week. I want to move on, fresh start. Let's sound off on something that either had your chili running hot positively or negatively from week 4. Where did you land?
Yeah, I mean, it's so strange to see these coaches that are paid millions of dollars that seemingly just continue to screw up and mismanage in-game situations. The most egregious that I saw last week was Colorado State and Jay Norvell. It was unreal. Their offense could not move the ball for 3 quarters. They stuck with Braden Fowler-Nicolosi at quarterback. They finally pulled the plug and they brought in Jackson Broussard. He leads the team down the field to tie the game with 15 seconds to go. They line up to kick the extra point. The extra point was good. There was a flag for offsides on the extra point. So Jay Norvell takes the points off the board at home, decides to go for 2. He doesn't leave Broussard, the hot hand, in there, who had led the team to 2 touchdown scoring drives in the fourth quarter. They run the 2-point conversion with Taj Bullock, who is a running quarterback transfer from Akron and had not completed a pass all season. So you think, okay, great, they're going to line up in power. They're going to run it in there with Bullock. They'll win the game on the 2-point. No, they call rollout waggle to the right, and he throws a pass. Of course, it was not completed, and they lose the game by 1 point. It was just really stunning to see that sort of decision in personnel, taking the points off the board at home, not leaving the hot-handed quarterback in there, and he's taken a lot of flack on social media from Ram faithful, and deservedly so. It was just such bad situational coaching, some of the worst I've seen in a long time.
So you mentioned right there off the bat, they were at home. Are you always a believer when you're at home, go to overtime, at least get the juice from the home crowd and play to continue the game as opposed to winning right there? Whereas when you're on the road, you want to go ahead and strike while the iron's hot and potentially win with a walk-off. Is that kind of where you land there? Or do you have a bigger issue with the play call? Obviously, being at the 1-yard line with a run game and a running quarterback in there, you were expecting them to try to power it home.
I didn't mind the decision to go for it, but to bring in a third-string quarterback who hadn't completed a pass all season, and then you call a pass play for him instead of leaving the hot hand in there. I mean, Broussard was the call. You leave Broussard in there and let him make the decision, and I just think he was trying to be cute and outthink the room, and it just completely backfired. The play looked terrible. It never had a chance. It was just such mismanagement of a great situation. I would have gone for it as well, but I would not have run that play or that personnel.
For my sounding off segment here, I'm going to keep it positive. We're discovering things about these coaches all throughout the year. There's huge roster turnover, the coaching carousel, everything else. But we got 2 cover kings emerging here in the G5. It's Eddie George and Casey Keeler. Eddie George and his Bowling Green Falcons scored not 1, but 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns against Louisville to secure a backdoor cover. And then once he had it inside the number, I mean, they were down 23 points. It's time for an onside kick, right? Nah, we're good. Let's just get out of here. We'll kick it deep and allow Louisville to run the clock out. So that's clearly a coach that has his eye on what that closing number is, or at least is, keeping that in mind at some point, because why are you putting your foot on the accelerator, but then giving up when you're still, within 3 scores, you get the ball back, who knows what could happen. On the other side of it, Casey Keeler, man, talk about a gambling divisive moment where either you were on the Temple side like I was, or you're on the Georgia Tech side and you're pulling your hair out. He called not 1, but 2 timeouts in the final minute, down 31 with a backup quarterback. Like, everything was screaming, all right, they're just going to put up the white flag. They end up throwing a touchdown pass with 3 seconds left to secure the cover. And then just to add a little bit of added stress to this, a crazy ending from a gambling perspective, they give up a 61-yard run that could have been a touchdown. There was a holding flag. It was declined. Like, just a cardiac event of a football game down the stretch there. But Casey Keeler clearly cares about the gamblers who are putting their hard-earned money behind the Owls. So just keep that in mind. Some of these coaches, they don't care when, there's certain games that get out of reach. They just kind of throw in their backups and say, we're on to next week. And there's other ones that go down swinging, use all their timeouts. They're pushing the ball downfield. Just something to consider. Eddie George and Casey Keeler should be on that list of teams and coaches that you want to back. Now, before we get into our best bets, there's a quick and easy way for you to tail us. First, sign up for Action Pro. You'll get instant notifications when Action Network experts track a bet. Whether that's me, Duck, Stuckey, Colin Wilson, you're going to get those right away at the best prices. Plus, you can access our pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our predictive analytics team, and a ton of other benefits. To celebrate football's return, we're still here in the month of September. We've got a special offer, but you have to act now. Go to actionnetwork.com/pro and get $20 off the annual price with the promo code BBOC20. So don't miss out on the best bets at the best prices this fall. Visit actionnetwork.com/pro and use promo code BBOC20 to get $20 off a season of Action Pro. Another way you can tail some of the bets that we are going to discuss in this very episode is look for the quick slip links in the podcast and video descriptions, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. On to the best bets here in week 5. I'm going to tee you up first, Duck. Toledo laid an egg. Not anything new for Jason Candle. He loves doing that as a favorite, but usually they learn from those mistakes and they bounce back. And here we are in MAC play. They're drawing one of the worst teams in the country in Akron. They're laying just around, depending on the number that you get, either 20.5, 21, 21.5. That's how big the Rockets are favored at home. Walk me through this play in the Mid-American Conference.
Yeah, there's a lot of things situationally I like about Toledo this weekend. First thing we've seen Akron receive a boost in offensive production the last couple of weeks while facing two very, very poor coverage and tackling defenses in Duquesne and UAB. The Zips could not run the football with explosivity or effectiveness in their first couple of games against FBS competition this season, and they will not run it here. Toledo only giving up 62 yards per game on the ground and 1.9 yards per carry rushing the last 3 weeks. Akron has also received great play in recent games from Ben Finley in the past game, but again, they face significantly weaker secondaries in UAB and Duquesne. Toledo has a strong secondary with a top 40 coverage grade per PFF. Toledo is second nationally in pass down EPA per play. Akron dead last, 136th offensively in that. Toledo 32nd nationally in pass play success rate defensively. Akron is 136th. Akron's also 133rd nationally in pass play explosiveness achieved. They will have very little success throwing their way out of bad situations when they can't run the ball with any consistency or regularity. Toledo also able to really run the ball well and slow burn Akron on the ground throughout this game. The Akron front seven is really going to be in some major trouble here. We already saw Jason Candle have his annual loss as a double-digit fave. They got that out of the way last week in a conference road game against Western Michigan. All of the Toledo Rocket preseason goals are still out in front of them, but there's no margin for error. And now Toledo is playing with revenge off of an embarrassing loss to Akron last season. You saw Toledo last week really in complete control of that Western Michigan game until about midway through the fourth quarter. They were up 13-0 and cruising, and they let it slip away. I think Toledo and the Rockets light the fuse this weekend, and they leave no doubt. They really go for the jugular against Akron, who's going to be just completely up against it from a match perspective. I think we see the Akron offense regress back to what they were the first couple of weeks of the season, which is very little productivity, inability to move the football, ineffectiveness to convert third down or get the ball into the red zone. Toledo is just going to wax this team at home. I have no issue laying the 3 touchdowns.
And it's not just Jason Candle either. It's also the Jekyll and Hyde nature of Tucker Gleason. When he really brings it, this team has the balance. They have explosiveness on the outside. And there's other games where not only is he a shell of himself, but you can also see the coaching staff kind of protecting him, really limiting his attempts, having a lot of underneath stuff. So it could be boom or bust. I could see this being a potential alternate play as well. I think if all goes right for this Rocket offense, they could win going away by 4+ touchdowns. So just something to consider there. All right, best bet for me, Rice and Navy under 46. I had this one circled from the summer. My notes read simply anything over 40, play the under here. So clearly in the mid 40s, it's a play on the under at any one of those prices because this is a Service Academy total. When you look at these two teams, they both run plays at bottom 10 tempos in terms of seconds between plays in the entire country. They're also first and third in rush percentage in terms of how many plays that they're calling that are pure rush plays, not even RPOs. That's over 80% for both the midshipmen and the Owls. So a slow pace plus a running clock means that we could see likely fewer than 130 total plays here. So it just comes down to, will there be explosives or not? Rice is dead last in explosiveness at the FBS level, 136 out of 136 teams. Navy is markedly better in that department, but still only 73rd in explosiveness, not quite as good as they were at the beginning of last season. The question here is, can Rice play disciplined, fundamentally sound defense and tackle? The Owls are 40th in tackling, which is a really good indicator, in my opinion. And one little additional nugget here, I mentioned at the top, DC John Kay, who's a high school coaching legend in Texas. He won 4 6A state titles at North Shore in the Houston area. And when you coach at that level, when you're playing against all kinds of different offenses, really Texas high school football is the laboratory for football in general in not only the state of Texas, but kind of the country. You saw spread offenses come out of there, a lot of option offenses as well. You have to be able to defend so many different looks throughout an entire season. And one of the teams that he had to go through to win a couple of those state titles was Duncanville, a high school powerhouse that ran a nasty power option offense with lots of quarterback runs. A lot of the multiple sets that they're working with are very similar to when you look at Delaware from a formational standpoint, Navy on a weekly basis. That Delaware wing T offense, the millennial T offense under Drew Cronick, they're going to give you different things to prepare for. I think John Kay is sneaky, the perfect guy to kind of get Rice in the right headspace for this game. So I'm going to go under the 46. It's my favorite play here in week 5. It's a game that I think could be ground to a halt. We've seen Rice kind of be stuck in the mud offensively. I wouldn't be shocked if they had multiple 0-point quarters against this Navy defense. There's just not a whole lot that scares me other than the natural, will there be a defensive or special teams touchdown to throw a monkey wrench into things. But this is my play to get myself back on track here. As I said, hot start to the season. It's not been so great the last 2 weeks. I want to go back to the bread and butter and really focus on where my eyes were trained in the summer, in the preseason, where I thought there would be situation strategic advantages at certain numbers. This is one of them. What do you think about under between these two option offenses?
We're going to see a ton of running clock. We're going to see run heavy on both sides. I project that each of these teams are going to run 60 total plays. And so it just comes down to preventing the explosivity and avoiding the special teams or the defensive touchdown. But per second play, EPA per play, all of the math works out to this should be a total that should finish around 38. I don't think that Rice will have a tremendous amount of success here offensively. Could be a real struggle for them, but the only hope is that maybe they have to get down the field into the red zone and we see a decision for them to have to go for it, which then can create a long field for Navy the other way. I think this game will play to 9 possessions each. And so you're looking at trying to secure 4 or 5 stops on each side and limit the opposing offenses to a couple of field goal attempts each. I think we'll have enough to get it done here. I think Rice will be really up against it, trying to line up against the middies who have at least an idea and a baseline for what they want to do and some familiarity with the principles. And so as long as Rice can hang in there in the trenches and just limit some of the explosivity specifically from Navy in the pass department, if they don't get fooled with the pass game, then I think we'll be okay here with the under.
Now you're looking to the Mountain West for your second best bets. The Brotherhood, Timmy Chang and his Fighting Rainbows travel into the mainland to take on Air Force. I got to say right away, I'm going to give you credit because I liked Air Force Moneyline. I thought the number, maybe I'm just a little bit skittish after a cold streak here. I want to get a win on the board. But I was leaning that way from the get-go. Tell me why you're fine with this scaling all the way up to the edge of a full touchdown. Do you think that it's just a schematic bad matchup, or is it the travel element? Chang has been horrific on the road as the head coach at Hawaii, has not been able to get them rowing in the right direction. Obviously, he's trying different things, but the looks of it is that they're not going to be able to get over the hump, considering they had an opportunity to grab a win in a game that they were an underdog in against Fresno. They get the defensive touchdown. They get all these things working in their favor, but the offense is just not clicking. I don't know if you can blame Alejado being banged up or what, but at this point, it's hard to have a lot of faith in them scoring more than 17, 20 points in this game. And against a reborn Air Force offense that looks like they put the sluggish, underwhelming 2024 in their rearview mirror, it looks like they could run through this Rainbow Warrior defense.
Yeah, and we saw it last week. Even in Alejado's return, the offense just looked so jerky at home. 4.16 yards per play, which was their worst output in a home game this season. Alejado threw 47 passes, completed 28 of them for 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. We're 5 games in now, and Hawaii is averaging just 3.3 yards per carry, 96 rushing yards per game, and they have not rushed for a touchdown this season, and they are still, to their credit, adhering to trying to sprinkle in the run. But when the pass game is not a threat to stretch the defense vertically, you're just going to have zero success on the ground. Now we get road Hawaii with Micah Alejado still banged up. You saw it at the end of the Fresno game if you stayed up till 3:30 in the morning Eastern time like I did. And he was limping. He is just not himself, and he looked very, very average. It was no flash in the pan. It was no lightning in a bottle that we had seen from Alejado, and really his attitude and his demeanor and his body language just looked defeated. So I don't want that for him, but he is still hurt, and it was a noticeable limp. I don't have confidence at this point in Hawaii's defensive front to really stop the scheme. And I think Air Force has really finally figured some things out with their quarterback, as the offense against Boise was free-flowing and moved it really well when Liam Zarka was at the helm. So I think we're going to see more Liam Zarka this week. A couple other things. Air Force is first nationally in rush play success rate and in standard down success. Hawaii is just 86th and 94th, respectively, in those defensive categories. Air Force is 13th in offensive EPA per play and 8th in offensive finishing drives. So when they get down around the red area, in priors, they would have to settle for field goals, but they're punching it in for 6 quite often this season, which really bodes well for covering the spread. And Hawaii just 77th nationally in both defensive EPA per play and defensive finishing drives. So the matchup itself, I think Hawaii is just going to start to wear down. And through the rest of the schedule, Hawaii is a team I'm looking to fade. I don't think they're very talented. They've got a couple nice receivers. A couple of them are banged up. But this is overall just a bad matchup. It's a bad scheduling spot for Hawaii on the road. Hawaii is playing their 6th straight week and have yet to have the bye week. I think this is a team that'll really potentially benefit from having the bye, but they're sucking wind and they are just out of gas. This is a spot I had identified in the summer as a place to fade Hawaii when they go play at elevation. 6th week in, Air Force now really needs a big win to get their season and their conference schedule back on track now after dropping the first 2. Must win, backs against the wall for the Flyboys. I'm back in Air Force, anything under a touchdown.
All right, I'm going to close out our best bet segment with an over between Memphis and FAU. It's sitting at 61.5. We're going to go over that number because of the pace, and pace cuts both ways. Snail's pace for the midshipmen and the Owls in my first best bet, and now a lightning pace from FAU. The Owls snap it every 18.7 seconds. No other program in the country snaps it faster. No one's even under 20 seconds other than FAU. Memphis is far more methodical on the other side of the ball, but this handicap really comes down to the fact that FAU's defense is garbage. They're 108th in explosives allowed. They're 83rd in havoc, and that's after facing a true freshman in his very first career start and a middling FCS team. Their numbers should be better if they had real signs of life, but on defense, there was too many new faces. There's too many issues, and they just gave up 38 points to FIU, and FIU scored those 38 points, by the way, in the first 40 minutes of that game before going in a shell, keeping it vanilla, just trying to run out the clock in the Shula Bowl. So that is a really bad sign for where things are going to head in the AAC for FAU, because there are some offenses that are just going to drop a bomb on their head, and Memphis is one of them. The Memphis running game is going to eat in this game whoever is running the ball, whether it's QB runs or their backfield with Sutton Smith and Greg DeRosier. They're going to find green grass, they're going to find room to roam, and they're going to hit big plays. They just gave Arkansas's defense, an SEC run defense. I understand that they're at the bottom of the SEC in terms of what they do in the box. but they ran for 290 yards, 7 yards per carry in that game. FAU gave up 224 yards on the ground to FIU in the Shula Bowl. Keyshawn Owens ran wild in that one. It's hard to see them doing anything schematically that's going to slow down this Tigers rushing attack. And then defensively for Memphis, this has let down, at least in the first half, written all over it. FAU got to reset after a rocky start to the Kitley era, and maybe they're going to have some new wrinkles, be able to attack Memphis in different ways. Whereas Memphis is coming off a transformational win. All of a sudden, they're at the front of the college football playoff bid line, at least among the G5 teams. They're getting all the pats in the back. It was also an emotional roller coaster, that game against Arkansas. So all of this, I think it's just going to come down to the opportunity for FAU to make a big step forward in terms of what they've done. And really, it just comes down to finishing drives, because they've moved the football this year. They're 28th in total offense, but they've turned it over a ton. 9 turnovers in 3 games. No team in the country has a higher giveaway rate than they do. And when you look at what they've done in the red zone, 130th in red zone scoring, only 6 touchdowns and 11 trips in there. If they shore those things up, even just taking field goals and not coming up with empty trips, all of a sudden this is a different game in terms of the total and the opportunity to be played in the 70s. I think this is a buy low spot on the FAU offense. I think they're going to get into the 20s. I'll call it Memphis 41, FAU 27. Maybe one of those touchdowns is a late garbage time score. What are your thoughts on this one, the FAU offense? Do you think it's broken? Do you think the pieces aren't quite there with Veldkamp holding the ball too long, being confused? I mean, all you have to do is flip on that FIU game. And granted, the FIU secondary is pretty good by G5 standards, but he was making mistakes with the football left and right. Do you think he gets that cleaned up and they have an opportunity to score against a Memphis team that may be overlooking them a bit?
I definitely think they have a chance to do that and clean up some of the mistakes. They're still running an offense now that is unfamiliar to some, and so you're trying to get all 11 players on the offense up to speed on exactly what they're trying to do, and there was going to be some growing pains with this FAU team. We knew the defense was horrific. Schematically, when you look at what Memphis wants to do, they're going to line up in 12 personnel. They're going to use the big-bodied tight ends. They're going to run the rock, and they will run it right through FAU, and there's going to be no stopping it, just like they did against Arkansas. I think defensively for Memphis, they could be in some trouble, though. I think FAU is going to throw it around a ton. You talked at the beginning of the program about a couple coaches that sign up for 60 minutes, coaches that play to the buzzer. Well, that's Kitley. That's FAU. They they squeeze every last drop out of the orange. They're throwing 50 times a game. They're trying to get all the passing stats. They're trying to score as much as possible. And to their demise at times, we've seen them go for it flippantly on 4th down. That can create some short fields, and maybe Memphis punches in a couple cheapies. I don't know that this game will be particularly close, but that's probably because Memphis scores 51 and FAU's in the 20s. But you look at FAU against this Memphis secondary. This secondary can be beat. Georgia State threw it around for 340, and Arkansas last week threw it around for 325. Memphis is surrendering 6.8 yards per pass attempt this season, so they can certainly be got in the secondary. We'll see Messer have 12 to 14 targets his way. He'll have a ton of catches. He'll wiggle out of the slot and have some production there. I think this is one where you just can't set the total high enough. And again, we talked about this in the summer. FAU overs are going to be profitable. I'm going to continue to go that way. And I think Memphis will contribute here, because although they won't play exceedingly fast, they will gain so much in the chunk play department. They'll score quickly. It'll be 4 or 5 play drives rather than 9 to 11 play drives for Memphis. And then FAU will be playing from behind, and we'll see them continue to throw it around. So I love this. I already have the over in pocket. I think it's a wonderful play.
All right, let's turn now to the 4-minute offense. We're going to give highlight segments to a former G5 hero, Diego Pavia. They're no longer a cute story in the SEC. They're no longer kind of, an outsider trying to ruin a season. They got to start be taken seriously as an SEC contender, because the way that they're playing, not only did they absolutely rough up South Carolina and basically turn their entire season, now they're looking like they're going to be a 6-6 squad. But then they have the classic letdown spot. I've talked about it on the last show. There was 2 spots. There was Temple catching 24, and there was Georgia State catching 27.5. And the MO on both of those teams, Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, was that they would play down, play with their food a little bit, not necessarily take it seriously. Vanderbilt took it very seriously. I think they just They just scored another touchdown against Georgia State. It was incredible, their performance. But now they have another feisty G5 team coming in that's well coached by Bronco Mendenhall. Utah State also played 4 quarters of pretty competitive football with Texas A&M, and we saw Texas A&M sealing, at least offensively, against the Fighting Irish in South Bend. So walk me through this game, what you can expect, and some of the finer points that people should consider before putting a play in.
Yeah, so we saw Vandy off the major revenge game. Georgia State beat them last season, and Vandy clearly did not forget that, and they just blew the doors off of Georgia State. There was some significant motivation to continue to pour it on. And so here this week, there seems to be a little bit of a scheduling advantage for Utah State, who heads into the bye week before traveling out to Hawaii after that. If I'm Bronco, I just advocate to spend the bye week in Hawaii, to be honest with you. But Vandy goes to Alabama next. So that's the tricky scheduling spot here, is how are these guys going to handle this spot? And when you assess some of the PFF grades, Utah State grades out significantly stronger than Georgia State in pass coverage, stopping the run, overall defense. So I can understand why this spread is significantly shorter than what we saw last week with Georgia State. But there are still major concerns that I have about Georgia State being able to put the shackles on Vandy. Utah State will generate 0 pass rush here. They're 117th nationally in defensive havoc, and they are just not a strong overall tackling team per PFF. They will provide a little more resistance than Georgia State did, but Vanderbilt will still move the ball whenever they want. Utah State's offense could be in some significant major trouble here. Vandy is allowing just 2.6 yards per rush attempt over the course of the entire season. Utah State has a very weak offensive line, which has already allowed 16 sacks and 27 tackles for loss. Vandy is 13th nationally in defensive havoc registered, and really a solid, sound coverage unit. I can see Barnes holding on to this football far too long here and just consistently being under duress, which will result in sacks, throwaways, bad decisions. You know, you look at Utah State, just 14 for 46 on third down. But if you factor out their game against FCS McNeese last week, they were just 8 for 38 prior to that on third down. And Vandy is holding opponents to just 34% success on third down against them. I expect Utah State to not be able to run the football. They're going to be behind the sticks frequently, and they're going to have to deal with third and long a ton here. I see Vanderbilt having success offensively in early downs. There should rarely be an instance where they're behind the chains. You know, I want to take the unknown variables out of this one. I don't know how long they're going to play Diego Pavia and the starting offensive platoon in the second half. There's going to be some motivation to get the outcome of this game decided quickly and get some of the other players in there, because they're going to want to get on to Alabama as soon as humanly possible. So I would advocate a play here on Vanderbilt first half. They're minus 12.5. I can see this bunch in the red zone 3 or 4 times in the first half. I can see them very similar to last week. They scored a touchdown on every possession in the first half against Georgia State. I'm not sure Utah State will have enough defensively in the trenches at linebacker to be able to stop what Vanderbilt wants to do on the ground. And Utah State is just 123rd nationally in defensive finishing drives. Vandy is 10th offensively in finishing drives. We should see a 3-score lead at half before Vanderbilt salts the second half away. And we've seen Utah State with a propensity to play meaningful snaps in the second half, even when down. So I want to avoid a backdoor cover. Even if Vandy were up by 4 touchdowns, you're never really comfortable there. But I think the first half is the play at under 14. We can get Vanderbilt to score early and score often. They'll put the shackles on Utah State in the first half, and then they can just assess how they want to play out the second half before getting on to Alabama, which is a huge game for Vanderbilt and their trajectory. So I see this one playing out similarly in the first half. Vanderbilt will have plenty of success. I personally put in a play on Vanderbilt first half minus 12.5.
We turn now to our G5 Moneyline Underdog Parlay. I'm going to start with an FCS team. I know that I am treading into your territory, so I'm going to be brief here, and I want your honest reaction on this one, Duck. I got a top 10 FCS team that I think may be on a neutral field better than the team that they're playing. I think it's rightfully so that they're an underdog here traveling to Western Michigan. But Rhode Island's at just about plus 250. The Rams, as I mentioned, I think they're 7th in the coaches poll at the FCS level. They got a great passing offense. Devin Farrell to Marquise Buchanan. Keep in mind that name because he's somebody who's going to be in an NFL training camp next summer. He's 6'4". He's super explosive, 18 and a half yards per reception. He's the guy who breaks, the defense wide open when teams are focusing on stopping their running game. And I just look at this Western Michigan team. Yes, they beat Toledo. I think that's all about Jason Candle and the Rockets playing down on an annual basis to one team that they should dog walk, and they end up losing outright. When you look at this offense, they can't run block. Buckley is averaging 3 yards per carry. I have no faith whatsoever in their passing game. I think at the very least, this is kind of like a rock fight kind of game. And does Rhode Island get some success early in this game to make them feel like we belong here, we're the better team? Because if you just want to look at one major metric, Bill Connolly ranks every team 1 to 765th in the whole country. Rhode Island 124th, one of the highest rated FCS teams. Western Michigan 139th. So in terms of his internal numbers, even the boost from beating Toledo wasn't enough for them to leapfrog an FCS team like the Rams. I'm going to go, Rhode Island here, the biggest little state in the union. Go Rhodey. Talk me through why you like Western Michigan, because we were going back and forth on this throughout the week, and it seems like you have no problem laying up to 10 with the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, I've been so impressed with Western Michigan and how they've hung in there against superior opponents defensively. They played Michigan State very, very competitively in the opener. They played Illinois to 10-0 at the half, and they blew a couple red zone opportunities where they couldn't punch it in around the goal line, or that outcome would have been significantly different. A team that we have really identified as a strong, underrated G5 team is North Texas. Western Michigan had that game firmly in hand and gave it away at home. Could have very easily beaten the Mean Green, and they just took down conference favorite Toledo. They play very, very well at home, and Western Michigan takes these FCS games very seriously. They've covered a significant number of games over the last 15 years against FCS competition. And, you look at Rhode Island, and they are a very good FCS team. I still don't know what we'll see in the trenches with this group when they line up against Western Michigan. And I'm just also trying to consider the competition that they've played. Campbell and Stony Brook are both down, as is Holy Cross, who they beat 9-7. And last week they played against Long Island University. So I think Rhode Island's a good team. I think they could potentially really shine in CAA play and be a competitive, possibly a fringe playoff team at the FCS level. But I'm not sure that this group is ready to go to an FBS stadium and get the win.
So it sounds like you're trusting in this Western Michigan defense to hold Rhode Island below, let's call it 17 points. If they score 14, fine. I just still have my concerns about this passing attack. When you look at these numbers, they have one passing touchdown the entire year. Brock Lowry is somebody who's done it more with his legs than with his arm. I will just say this. If the Rams can get an early lead, I really like my position. I don't think that they are suited to come from behind because of how well Western Michigan has acquitted itself on that side of the ball. But at this price point, and by the way, if you're listening now, I would wait till later in the week. I think there's a better chance coming off the Toledo win. People are going to have that recency bias. Some more money is going to flood in on the Broncos, and this, slowly but surely gets closer to 3-1. 3-1, I love it. I already have it locked in, in the app at plus 250. So go ahead and follow that. But this is something that's, I think, could end up being a better value come kickoff than it is right now when you're listening. All right, Duck, what are you pairing this up with from an underdog perspective?
Oh, this is gross this week. We searched far and wide to try to find underdogs that we could tangibly feel good about here, and this is one I have played. But Middle Tennessee State has started to just put some competent football together. They've looked so terrible at points this season. They looked really bad in the opener against Austin Peay, and then they put it together for a half against Wisconsin, and then they looked terrible for 3.5 quarters against Nevada and pulled out a victory. And then they played competitively against Marshall at home. There was a weather delay. There was back and forth football. A couple breaks didn't go their way. They lost the game. Kennesaw State was able to catch Arkansas State in a dream scenario where they had played Arkansas for the first time ever, and then Arkansas State went in and hosted Iowa State. Should have won the football game on the field. Kind of got hosed a little bit. And then Arkansas State had to step out of conference and go to Kennesaw State, the smallest FBS stadium out of 136, and just a strange environment they hadn't been in. What does Kennesaw State do? They go win the game on the field. Good for them, but should they be laying all these points now? 8.5 points they're laying? Yeah, I don't know. I have this rated as closer to -2, -3. So we're getting a lot of value on Middle Tennessee, plus 260 on the money line. Kennesaw State, just 134th in offensive success rate, 120th in offensive finishing drives. Just 7 out of 15 red zone trips have ended in touchdowns. And Kennesaw is dead last in FBS in standard down success rate. So this team cannot be counted on to continually be ahead of the sticks, continue to move the football effectively with successful plays. They're going to need chunk plays. They're going to have to get some explosives. And I just don't know if that's something that we can count on from this group a second week in a row after doing it against Arkansas State last week. When you look at Middle Tennessee, Vadiato averaged 9.1 yards per attempt last week and threw for 300 yards against Marshall. That offense is starting to turn the corner. They're not all the way there yet, but the entire operation just looked a lot more sharp, a lot more competent than in the first couple of weeks. Middle Tennessee saw a ton of run plays last week, and they really held in there pretty well against Marshall. Again, I think this game really should be lined a little closer to even or -2 than what we're getting here. There's a ton of value in Middle Tennessee. I've already put in a play on the plus 8.5 in the app. I think Middle can go out there and win the game on the field. So at plus 260, this is absolutely the money line dog shot I'm taking a shot with this week.
When you put these two plays together, they land anywhere between 10 and 11 to 1. Make sure to shop around and get the best number, because a money line parlay like this could make your entire month. So go ahead and make sure that you're finding the best number possible before locking in that parlay. All right, check out the Parlay Express account in the free award-winning Action Network app, and we'll be there posting our G5 Moneyline Parlay, making it easy for you to find. You'll find a bunch of other fun long shot bets there as well. You can also find the quick slip link in the podcast and episode description on the video side of things, where you can find us at the BBOC YouTube page. You can also visit us at actionnetwork.com/betnow to find and tail some of the bets we've discussed thus far in the episode, including our G5 Moneyline Parlay. All right, it's 2-minute drill time, my friend. Duck, you are up first, and you're pulling from one of my favorite teams. We only talk about them really during college basketball season, and if anything, it's just in passing because they got a great name. We're talking about the Blue Hose Presbyterian College. Walk me through your first play here.
Yeah, they're hosting Morehead State this week in Pioneer Football League, non-scholarship Pioneer Football League play. These two teams, Presbyterian and Morehead State, have a similar schedule profile in terms of the opponents that they faced, but the similarities end there when you look at the actual results. Presby has defeated 2 Southern Conference teams, while Morehead State has been blown out badly by Illinois State and Austin Peay. Morehead State giving up 466 yards per game defensively and 7.5 yards per play. 9 yards per pass surrendered through the air by Morehead State and shredded consistently in pass defense. Morehead State cannot pass protect very well. They've already given up 9 sacks and 21 TFLs this season. Presbyterian should feast in the backfield against Morehead State and will create a ton of havoc, a ton of pressure, and force at least 2 or 3 turnovers in this one. The difference maker for me is Presbyterian quarterback Colin Hurst. 68% completions, a 13-4 touchdown to interception ratio, and already 1,200 yards thrown for through the air. This is a bad matchup for Morehead State. Anything under 2 touchdowns is a go. I have this one projected at Presbyterian -10.5. Anything under 2 touchdowns is a full go. Next one here, Tennessee Tech. This is a projection of -8.5 for the Golden Eagles. They're playing Tennessee State. These two programs have so much separation between them in terms of talent and execution. I have this one playing to a 4-touchdown blowout, so at the current projections of 8.5, this is going to be a sizable play. I would lay up to 19.5 with Tennessee Tech. Tennessee State is 2-1 run heavy and averaging just 3 yards per attempt on the ground. There's not a lot to like out outside of a couple running backs that can have a little pop. And quarterback play for the Tigers is just not proficient enough to stress the Golden Eagles defense here. Tennessee Tech has 3 running backs that are averaging 9 yards per carry on the ground, and this ground attack will hum in this one. Quarterback Kakoa Vesperas, we talked about him earlier this year, 68% completions, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, and just a really buttoned up team against a team that's still finding themselves. Lay it with the Golden Eagles, anything under 19.5. Last one here, Southeastern Louisiana. They are projected 9.5-point favorites against Southland Conference newcomer UT Rio Grande Valley, who is in their first year as a program. They've been an excellent story at the FCS level. They're playing good football, and they're actually 4-0 this season. But let's be real. These guys have played a bottom 5 Division II level program, 2 very weak NAIA foes, and Prairie View A&M. I'm not buying it here, even with Eddie Lee Marburger, formerly of UTSA, leading the offense for UTRGV. Southeastern Louisiana has losses against Louisiana Tech and LSU and have really beaten up on the other teams on their schedule with a similar talent profile to Texas Rio Grande Valley. I am laying this number here. I would lay up to 3 touchdowns. Anything under 3 touchdowns is a full go for Southeastern Louisiana, who is a very strong Southland Conference team. Anything under 2 touchdowns is going to be a sizable play here. So lay it with Southeastern Louisiana.
All right, time for my 2-minute drill. Let's start with App State catching 9.5 in the first half at Boise State. Rest in peace to Sean Clark. He was a huge part of the App State community for 9 years coaching there, and he coached and recruited a large amount of players on this very team. So I think from an emotional standpoint, you're going to get premium effort, particularly in the first half from the Mountaineers. These kids are also coming off a bye, so I think that gets them ready emotionally. It gets them ready for what they're going to see from a Boise team that is starting to move in the right direction after laying an egg in that opener against South Florida. That looks a lot better given the fact that South Florida then went and upset the Florida Gators. So that loss all of a sudden gets put in the proper perspective. Boise is moving in the right direction, but they also have a look-ahead spot now because they have Notre Dame coming up next on their schedule. They win that one in South Bend. All of a sudden, they're back in the playoff conversation, but, being able to capture that auto bid from the G5. I want a motivated side in this one. I'd love to get 10, but I think 9.5 is enough, so I'm on the Nears there in the first 30 minutes. New Mexico State catching 13.5 at New Mexico. The Rio Grande rivalry is always tight. Remember that. It's been within this point spread in 9 of the last 10 years. And to catch everyone up, we thought both of these teams would either be rebuilding or just outright bad this year. That has not been the case. State is 2-1 with wins over Bryant and Tulsa, and New Mexico is 2-1 with a really strong showing in defeat at Michigan, then a 10-point win over FCS Idaho State, and then a shocking 25-point beatdown of UCLA. But I think that UCLA win is throwing the power rankings out of whack, and that's why this point spread is closer to 2 touchdowns. UCLA no-showed that game. They fired their coach afterwards. New Mexico is well coached. I get that. They are a hard-nosed, rush-first kind of team, but they don't put too much on Jack Lane's shoulders. And there's, metrics here that worry me greatly with the Lobos as nearly a 2-touchdown favorite. Namely, they're outside of the top 100 in terms of explosiveness, rushing success rate, and their defense creates little to no havoc, 132nd there. Give me the Road Aggies here and an average Logan Fife. I make jokes about him all the time, but I think I'm going to get C+, B- quarterback play out of him. And when I'm catching just about 2 touchdowns, I think that's enough to stay within the number. I'm going to close this out with Western Kentucky traveling to play Missouri State, the FBS newbie. Let's go over the total of 59. I have not given up on Maverick and Coach Bowie. They were out of sync last week against Nevada, and Coach Choate is a defensive guy who can make life hard on just about any offense, play caller, quarterback. But this Hilltopper system is all about stacking completions. And Missouri State is allowing opposing passers to hit 70.6% of their pass attempts. That's 3rd worst in the FBS. Western Kentucky can also play incredibly fast, that NASCAR tempo. It's going to give them enough plays on their side and also to get Missouri State back on the field to hit this over. Missouri State, by the way, Jacob Clark has been 2 quarterbacks this entire year. Against quality P4 competition like USC and SMU, he was under consistent fire, taking sacks, throwing 5 interceptions. He was sacked 10 times in those 2 games. Against Marshall and UT Martin, go Skyhawks, he completed 70% of his attempts, hit 6 touchdown passes against just 1 interception. That's the Jacob Clark we're going to get in this game for Missouri State. And also, he's got one of his best targets back. Jake Blackstrain, his top target, is now healthy. I think he can expose a Hilltopper secondary. that has good numbers this year against the pass, but I think that's a byproduct of the offenses that they faced. Toledo was happy to run it for 300 yards on them. Sam Houston was a mess. North Alabama is an FCS team, and Nevada was relying on Chubba Purdy, who we all know is awful. So I think both teams light it up. We get closer to 70 points here than the listed total of 59. All right, that's it for my 2-minute drill. We now close this episode out with a familiar segment, our tug of war. We are back to midfield. Louisville let me down. I was just about knocking on the door of Ducks red zone, and then Louisville gave up 14 points in the fourth quarter to the cover king, Eddie George. Lesson learned on my side. But we're back with Eddie George here. I'm going to take Bowling Green plus 10 at Ohio. I'm going to tell you why before Duck gets to counter and why he's in favor of basically tailing the home team and the Bobcats, who have looked great on offense. What can I count on here? Let me try to talk myself into the Bowling Green side beyond just the fact that they muck games up. Is it Drew Pine? No. They have to play keep away. They have to play very slow, but their run game has performed far better than I thought it would in a year zero situation with Eddie George. The rebuild is already there because he's found 3 interchangeable parts at running back. You got Roberts, Petaway, and McMillan. They're all between 5'8", 170, and 5'10", 190 pounds. So as a trio, they're not breaking down. They're sharing the rock. As a trio, they're averaging nearly 5 yards per carry. Maybe it's the first-year head coach, but I think there's certainly that voice they're hearing in the locker room. They're fighting for 60 minutes. They're not giving up. They're interested in both winning games outright, as they already have this year, beating Liberty as a pretty sizable underdog, but also the moral victories of fighting for 4 quarters against some of the stronger teams that they played. When I look at it as well, their defense continues to show up on big downs, and that's how you stay within the number against an offense as dynamic as the Bobcats. They're 47th in third down defense, and then on fourth downs, they already have 4 stops this season. So that can be something that can kind of turn the tide in this game. The other part of it is, and the reason why I just can't give out Ohio in this tug of war, are they gassed? They should be gassed. They played 3 straight paycheck games. Navarro got banged up against Ohio State. Then they come out flat against Gardner-Webb, which should have been a free square, get their starters out at halftime. Instead, they fall down 14-3. They got to fight their way back. It was a game in the fourth quarter. I'll take the cover king here and the 10 points to pester Ohio and hang around inside of 10. All right, Duck, the floor is yours. Why are you on the Bobs?
Yeah, BG has defeated a horribly underperforming Liberty team out of Conference USA and then FCS Lafayette. And the Falcons honestly have looked pretty good in their other games against Power 4 opponents this season. The problem with Bowling Green is that they have looked good after the outcome was well decided, while covering 3 touchdown spreads against Cincinnati and Louisville. But I'm just not sure we ever get to a point here where this game is truly in the bag either way. And so I don't think we'll see Ohio roll out their reserves on defense. I think you look at Ohio, they've kind of impressed me a little bit with their ability to tighten the screws in the red zone and on third down. Only 6 red zone possessions out of 15 attempts have resulted in touchdowns, and opponents are converting just 10 out of 45 third down attempts. The Drew Pine voodoo at the end of games really has to stop at some point. The passing numbers the last couple of weeks have regressed from his peak against Cincinnati. Only 50% completions and 277 combined passing yards in the last 2 games combined. I expect Bowling Green to really have to grind for everything that they are going to try to do here. Bowling Green just 126th nationally in offensive explosiveness and 106th offensively in finishing drives. Bowling Green in the red zone this season, 13 trips, only 4 touchdowns, and 4 times they've been turned away empty-handed. So you just really can't consistently count on them to matriculate the ball down, convert third down, get into the red zone, and score it to try to cover this relatively short number. Bowling Green doesn't have nearly the defense, in my opinion, to try to pin down Parker Navarro, who's a major dude, and the Ohio offense. We saw Navarro average 8.1 yards per pass attempt over the course of this entire season and 65% completion percentage. The ground game finally got humming last week, 318 yards on the ground, and they're getting Bangura kind of back into his groove there at Ohio. He's really hitting the holes hard. This will be a close game and a good game. This will be a really fun MAC game. We'll get to learn a lot about these teams on where they're going to be in MAC play, but at the end of the day, Bowling Green has pulled the wool over our eyes a couple of times now with backdoor covers. I don't think Lightning strikes a third time here. I think Ohio pulls away in the fourth. I think they'll win this game by 16, 17 points.
We lost General Booty. He exhausted his eligibility, but we now have a major dude in Parker Navarro to get behind. I just hope I can get behind him after this week and I can pull ahead here in the tug of war. That'll do it for today's episode of the Group of Five Deep Dive under the Big Bets on Campus banner. Thanks for tuning in as always. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the pod. Remember, if you'd like to tail some of the bets that you heard from Duck and myself throughout today's episode, there will be a quick slip link in the episode description. You can also go to actionnetwork.com/bet now. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, search for BBOC, and you'll have access to all of our college football content throughout the fall. And as always, check out our guys, Stuckey and Colin, on the Thursday episode. They're going to run you through their entire card from the marquee matchups in the top 25 all the way down to their trash segment. Thanks for listening to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. And as always, best of luck with all your bets.